This video briefly previews chapters 11 and 12 of Grande's memoir. In chapter 11, we get a very careful accounting of Reina and Betty's experience living together in an apartment in Santa Cruz. I have a couple images up here I wanted to share. On the left is a map of the neighborhood in Santa Cruz where they lived. And this is West Cliff Drive along here. And it's mentioned several times in the chapter. I thought it would be fun for you to hear it. Here's a picture of West Cliff Drive, and there's one of the neighborhoods of houses that Grande refers to, and when she talks about the houses there and has this great line about writing and her dream home. And I'll leave it for you to find that wonderful line. The thing that's really interesting in terms of concepts related to education and psychology from chapter 11 is the idea of intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. And I've got a couple little visuals here that might help you understand that. I have a link to this document below the video, so if you want to come actually look at these images in more detail in the Google Doc, you can. We'll be referring to these two ideas a lot. Intrinsic motivation is motivation that comes from within you. Extrinsic motivation is motivation that comes from outside you. And one of the things that Reina discovers in this chapter is that she can't motivate Betty. Betty has to find intrinsic motivation. Betty has to want something for herself. And the word Grande uses for motivation is a really cool word from Spanish called ganas. And ganas is all about the concept of intrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation means you're doing it either for yourself or for the inherent value of the task itself. You're doing it for the joy, for the growth, for the intellectual, cultural, personal engagement, the excitement, doing it for its own sake, doing it for your own fulfillment, as opposed to extrinsic motivation when you're doing it because it's what someone else wants you to do, when you're doing it because you'll be rewarded by society or an employer or a school or a parent. You're doing it because it's someone else's expectation. And you can see how this idea of intrinsic and extrinsic motivation could be a really valuable concept for thinking about agency, right? And clearly, individual agency is going to be more effectively grounded when it comes from intrinsic motivation rather than extrinsic. Okay, the second thing that happens in chapter 12 is Grande introduces us the second thing that happens in this reading in chapter 12, not chapter 11, is where Grande introduces us really to kind of her new stage as a writer. She talks about a literary journal on campus she's got involved in, self-publishing her collection of short stories, turning those into a play, using grants from the colleges to do all this, working with her mentor Marta to do this and develop her own Spanish-speaking skills. All sorts of wonderful things going on here. As she talks about that, she mentions a bunch of great Latinx, Chicanx writers. I've created kind of a visual catalog here with links. So if you want to explore those folks more, you can click on the document below the lecture and click on all those links. These are some of the heroes that Reina mentions learning about from Diana and Marta. But the two big influences that the chapter focuses on are Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz and Gloria Ansaldúa. And those are the two big moments I want you to really focus on and think about. They are great examples of terms and examples. All the writers that Grande introduces are things that should be circled with a T in the margin in your annotations. But these two should probably be a T/E. They are terms, invitations to further explore and learn more, but they're also examples that she really digs into. And I think it's worth noting that Grande is very much grounding herself here in ideas of feminism and race and cultural analysis that have a deep foundation in Latina feminist thinking. So really good stuff here to work with. I'm hoping that this is going to be a springboard for us to explore ideas of non-binary senses of identity, and hybridity. And you're going to hear Grande talk about a self that is neither one thing or another, but both. She refers to it later as kind of a third way, a third identity, a mixing of a traditional binary of you're this or that with some new combination. And I want you to pay really close attention to how she talks about that, and then I'm going to ask you to do a little independent investigation of those ideas. Finally, two big symbols in chapter 12, the turtle and the Waiachi tree. And so look for those symbols and think about what she's up to there.